So I asked her what she meant, and she said that, that our whole life is predetermined and that the same thing is going to happen no matter what. And I said to her, no, I don't believe that. I don't believe in fate in that sense, because I believe that every single action we take can have an immense ripple effect. Welcome to Empower and Evolve, the vortex of growth that you have been looking for. I am your host, Kat Tunnyberg. I'm a mindset coach for female leaders, and I am committed to helping you cultivate the mindset shifts that generate you wild success. Each episode, we explore ways to tap into your true potential. We face the shadows that hold you back, and we embrace the journey toward your most abundant life. If you love what you learn here today, then I invite you to share this episode with someone that needs to hear it. Right, it's time to plunge in. Welcome, my love. I'm really excited to be recording this podcast episode for you. It's not often that I read a book and then say it has changed my life. It happened to me earlier this year when I read The Surrender Experiment by Michael A. Singer. That book came to me at a time when I needed it the most. And I feel like 10x is easier than 2x by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy came at another time when I needed it the most. Recently, one of my friends, who's also one of my dear clients, asked me a really great question. She asked me, do I believe in fate? And I asked her, what do you mean by fate? Like, I do believe that everything happens for a reason. I do believe in that. And I do believe that everything happens for us, not to us. That is a very strong belief of mine, which sometimes is easier to hold on to than others. Like, not gonna lie, when shit hits the fan and things go wrong, it's hard to trust and know that everything is happening out for me. And yet there always is a silver lining in the end. So this belief has served me well. And at the same time, I'm human. So I asked her what she meant. And she said that, that our whole life is predetermined and that, it's just the same thing is gonna happen no matter what. And I said to her, no, I don't believe that. I don't believe in fate in that sense, because I believe that every single action we take can have an immense ripple effect. If you've ever heard of the saying, the butterfly, or like the concept of the butterfly effect, that's basically what the butterfly effect is. Let me actually bring up and I can read to you exactly what the butterfly effect is in case you've never heard it before. Are you ready for it? In chaos theory, the butterfly effect is the sensitive dependence on initial conditions in which a small change in one state of a deterministic nonlinear system can result in large differences in the later state. Difficult to understand, right? So let me break it down in a little bit of a simpler example. The butterfly effect is derived from the example of the details of a tornado, the exact time of formation, the exact path taken, being influenced by minor perturbations, such as distant butterfly flapping its wings several weeks earlier. In essence, the butterfly effect means that something as small as a butterfly flapping its wings can have an impact on a tornado weeks later. So I'm a firm believer in the butterfly effect and how small changes can have a big impact. And you even heard Jen Moonflower shared this on the episode where we talked about fear in the psyche, where, a small degree difference on a map, like if you just fall a small degree difference on the map, the path that you're going to end up in, the location is going to be completely different to where you were originally. And there was another example, and it was actually listed in the 10x is easier than 2x book, where someone had accidentally put in the wrong flight details on a plane just by like 2-degree difference, and the plane ended up crashing into a mountain, and it was too late and everyone died. Wild. So I believe that small, minute changes in your life can have a huge impact down the road. And why am I sharing this with you? Because I believe that sometimes we need to be ready to receive the message in order to receive it fully. So sometimes we need to hear the same message a million times until we can actually hear it. And that's why this is a little bit of a side note here, but people need to hear your medicine. If you're an entrepreneur and you have the story that, oh, so many people are doing the work that you're doing, and who are you to share it, and other people are doing it better, and why should you even bother because there's so many people doing the same work? But there's none of you. There's none of you doing the work that you're doing. And people need to hear the concepts in your language. And I often actually get this from my clients where they say to me, like, oh my God, I have heard this concept so many times, but the way that you explained it actually made it land. So people need your medicine. You need to share your message. You need to put yourself out there. Coming back to the book and this whole story, and like why I'm going around in circles a little bit at the beginning. I got this book back in August. I have been in Robin Savage's mastermind since the beginning of this year. And I hope to get her on this podcast for an episode because she's incredible at what she does, which is branding, and consulting in the brand space and helping people really create their personal brand. We were meant to record a podcast and things just happened, so we haven't been able to realign yet, but I do hope to get her on in the future, so watch for that episode. But I've been inside her mastermind for a while. So she has seen me go through 2024, which has been wild. I haven't taken as many pivots, and you may even not have recognized these pivots, but they've been a lot of internal pivots. I haven't had this many pivots in my business and as like who I am and what I believe in ever in my life as I've had in this short period of time this year. And she has seen me through these. Oh my God. I have shared them in her mastermind. So in August, I was sharing one of these pivots with her. And it was the pivot when I decided to stop offering one-off somatic support sessions and just cut them off. And I remember sharing how, I was feeling a little bit conflicted about making that decision, but how it at the same time felt really right. And she told me, oh my God, you need to read this book that I just listened to, which is 10x is easier than 2x. And I didn't know at the time, but that book also changed Robin's life at the time when she listened to it. So I ordered the book, but I didn't start reading it because I was actually busy reading Joe Dispenza's I Am Supernatural, which it took me quite a while to get through, which is always the case when I read one of his books. Like I love his work. I'm obsessed with Joe Dispenza and what he teaches. Yet I often find that it takes me time to finish his books. So I wasn't ready to read 10x is easier than 2x. And I believe that there was a reason for it. So I ordered the book and I had it on my shelf for a while. And it wasn't until 10 days ago that I actually picked it up. And I picked it up on the day that I had a huge realization around another pivot in my business. And it's not necessarily a pivot, but it was more clarity around who I wanted to work with and what my unique gift to this world is. So I started reading the book. And straight away, I was absolutely fascinated by this concept. So you may have heard about the 80-20 rule. It gets used in many, many different aspects. But in the aspect that I'm going to bring it to you today, when I'm kind of just giving you a little bit of a review on my biggest takeaways from the books, because I could record podcast episodes on some of the concepts alone, because there's just so much in there. So today is just the biggest takeaways and like my general realizations from this book. So the 80-20 rule in business is, okay, let me try and say this correctly, is something along the lines that 80% of your income is created from 20% of your clients. Something along those lines. It can be different with everything. So if 80%, and this might not be exactly, but I get it. So if 80% of your income comes from 20% of your clients, which means it comes from 20% of your work, what is the other 80% of work that you are doing that is taking up a lot of your headspace and time, but isn't actually honing in on your unique ability and creating the income that you are after? Learning that concept, I don't know, like I've probably heard something similar before in the past, but reading it at that time when I was having this breakthrough around who I wanted to work with and who I wanted to serve was huge. Like I read that and I was like, oh my God, I have unconsciously been already getting rid of these 80% of things that I'm great at, but that isn't my unique ability that, only I can do in the way that I do it. And I realized that the somatic support sessions and letting go of those was one of them. The other one, which was still, is a bit of a tough one to fully admit to and let go of, is letting go of my monthly women's circles. And I know what my next one is going to be. I don't know how many of my yogis listen to this podcast. Yoga is going to be next. Within the year 2025, I'm going to be stop teaching yoga. Because I started to, like, the book inspired me to do the math and actually start to look at where my income is coming from, how much the different areas of my business make me money. Because I do have different incomes. Like even in my financial tracker that I update on every Monday, I have different categories that I that divide all my income into at the end of the month. And these categories, I'll name them to you because I don't have any secrets. Is yoga. Back then it was my monthly circles, coaching. I still get a little bit of income from Juice Plus, and then courses and events, which are more like if I have courses that I'm selling at that time or if I'm hosting any one-off events. So these are the categories that create income in my business. And I started to look back over the months that I had, and I started to look at where most of my income come from. And I didn't even have to look at the numbers to know where this come from. It's coaching. I know that coaching is my zone of genius. And I was even today, like if you're watching the YouTube video, you may see how fabulous my brows are. I had a brow tint, a brow lamination today. And my brow lady said to me how someone else and her were talking about how I am just so great at calling people out on their shit in a loving way. It is my gift. I am a fucking phenomenal coach. I know that. Even yesterday, I hosted my mastermind call and boom, like the stuff that just dropped out of my mouth. I was like, oh my God. And like the girls were like, wow, I really needed to hear that. Like, I know that coaching is my 20%. It's my unique ability, and no one coaches the way that I coach. People, sometimes have gone to like, oh, Kat's getting coached by this person, so I should go and get coached by this person. Well, tough luck, my love. Like I actually am in like 3 different containers. So I'm never only being coached by one person. I'm reading millions of books and taking courses. Like you going to one of my mentors is only going to give you one small aspect of who I'm learning from, because it's a lineage of teachers that I carry, and the way that I distill what I learned from them is unique to me. So going to my mentor is not going to give you the same results that I am getting, because you are only getting one small aspect of that. So coming back to this, I know I'm a fucking fabulous coach. I know that that's my unique ability, and most of my income comes from this. And I started to really look back at it. And I looked back at the circles and how much money they made me. And I looked back at the somatic support sessions and how much money they made me. And it was an easy decision. Like straight away, I saw it like, yeah, these were things that took up my time and kept me from actually focusing on my 20% to hone in on learning and becoming better at coaching and better at what I do. So I was like, great. Well, that was an easy decision. Now, yoga is not that easy. Because yoga, I actually, for the exchange of time, like if I was to just think about the money that I get for the time that I spend teaching, is really great. But it's not just that. It's also the talking to the clients, it's the emailing, it's all the things that come with it that actually take a lot of time. And yes, I'm a great yoga teacher. I know my classes are really good. But am I the best? No, I don't think so. Maybe my students would think that. But I believe that there's other teachers who are way better than me. And in this book as well, it talks a lot about, it's actually for humans really hard to let go of our 80% because we have a really big aversion to loss. And, you know, you see it even in people with terrible relationships. They cling onto it, like they white knuckle onto it because they're like, oh, maybe things will change. And they have this sense of loyalty that they can't leave and things can't change. And we have this same kind of loyalty to things that aren't working anymore. So letting go of the 80% to focus on your 20%, to get better at your 20% is tough for most people. Is really, really tough for most people. And yet it's so freeing. So I started to realize that the next thing for me that has to go is yoga. And if you're a yogi of mine and you're listening to this podcast, then you heard it here first. I haven't decided when yet. It might already be after the series that I'm running in December and January. I don't know. I'm going to see how the next couple months go. So that was one of my really big takeaways, is actually starting to go back through my numbers and start to look at where most of my money is coming from, and start to look at what is my 80%, what is my 20%? Like what is the things that take up 80% of my time that only give me about 20% of my income? And this is not just like actual time working, but it's also the headspace and all the things that come with it. So I was like, okay. And it actually got me really excited, because if you know me, if you've been here for a while, you know, I'm a projector. I'm a 4-1 projector. So I have the double whammy of the line 1 and a projector, which means like, I love learning. Oh my God, I'm obsessed. Like seriously, the amount of books I read, the amount of courses I take, I could spend hours learning. And the way that I combine all this knowledge is like really unique to me. And if you've been in one of my spaces, in one of my containers, if you've coached with me, you know that I pull in from all the different things that I've learned, and I'm like blended into this beautiful thing that can only be served in the way that I serve it. So that was great to realize that. And especially also after having this little epiphany around my ideal client and who I really wanted to help and who I really wanted to work with. And then realizing that, yeah, me really focusing on the 20% and getting so fucking good at it that I add so much value that people just can't say no. Like that's what I need to do. So it was like this big relief of actually starting to recognize that I don't have to be working crazy hours Instead, I have to really focus on my, what they call in the book, unique ability, and become better at it so that I can continue adding more value to the clients that see me as the right fit for them. And that just felt so good. Like so, so good. And this was probably the biggest takeaway that I've had from this book. There's so many. Like, seriously, if you're an entrepreneur and you have big fucking dreams, you need to read this book. And even on the front page or whatever, it says how world-class entrepreneurs achieve more by doing less. That's like what I teach people. I am not someone who, enforces hustle culture and working more and doing more and like working harder and blah, 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 blah. Like, that's not me. So learning about this concept was huge because it actually encourages you to continue evolving. And the cool thing is that what my current 20% is, in the future, there's going to be an 80% there that it's time to let go of, to continue to evolve. And 10x is not about doing more. It's not about quantity. It's about quality. So I really want you to start thinking about, what is your 20%? What is something that only you can do in the way that you want to do it, in the way that you can do it? And where are you spending 80% of your time because you think you have to? And for some people, a big chunk of your income might still come from the 80%. But if you start to break it down with how much time you spend in these different areas and how much income they create from that time spent in that area, then you will start to recognize that there is a disconnect. Like, even at the end of the book, I want to read you this section because I feel like this is going to really hone it in for you as well. He talks about being hired by a church to get really understanding of, how they can apply the 10x principle and where their 80 and 20% was. So let me just find this and I'll just read it to you. It's like in the very end of the book. It's in the conclusion section, but it's so good. Recently, I had the opportunity to take these concepts into a unique and personally meaningful environment. I'd been asked by the mission leader of my church in Fort Lauderdale to come and train the leadership of his mission on these concepts. The mission leader had a spreadsheet of the mission's numbers over the previous 12 months. As a mission of around 200 missionaries, they'd baptized 430-ish people in the past 12 months. Part of the report broke down the different finding activities into 3 core categories. 1, working with members of the church. 2, finding people to teach in their own way, such as knocking on doors. And 3, using social media. 40% of the baptisms came from working with the members of the church and getting referrals from those members of people to teach. 34% of the baptisms came from the missionaries' own finding efforts. One of these activities accounted for a huge portion of these finding efforts, 13% overall, which was getting referrals from those they were teaching. Finally, 26% of the overall baptisms came from finding and teaching people via social media. During the training and while going over these numbers, I asked the missionaries how much time they work during a regular day. 8 hours, they responded. How many of those 8 hours are spent working with members? I asked. Maybe 1, they replied. What about working on social media? I asked. Maybe 15 to 30 minutes, they replied. So let me get this straight. You spend 1.5 hours of your day engaged in activities that account for 66% of your baptisms. 1.5 out of 8 hours is 18.75%, less than 20%. If you include the simple activity of the missionaries asking the people they're teaching for referrals, which takes just a few minutes and accounts for 13% more of their baptisms, then we're talking about almost exactly 20% of their time yielding 80% of results. According to constraint theory, every unit or system has a core goal or objective. That core objective also highlights the core constraint or bottleneck that must be solved in order for the goal to be achieved. Without solving the bottleneck, you won't achieve the goal no matter how much energy and effort you're putting in. The bottleneck is 20%. Everything else is the 80%, which doesn't meet the filter of the goal. In most businesses, the majority of energy and resources are put toward activities in the 80%, not the bottleneck, which is why most businesses are growing linearly, not exponentially. Most businesses are 2x at best, not 10x. To go 10x, you let go of the 80% and put energy, attention, and resources into the bottleneck, which is the 20%. It goes a little bit more into it, but I'm not going to read you all of this. But they had some really, really great realizations. I'll read you just a couple of things that I have highlighted. If you want to go bigger and elevate your standards and baseline, then you'll need to let go of 80% and stop optimizing for dots. When you insist on doing what you've been doing, 10x is essentially impossible. Indeed, if they got serious about the 20% and getting 10x better in the few things that matter, as well as letting go of the 80% that is keeping them stuck, they'd be able to go 10x. So what is the 80% that is keeping you stuck? What is keeping you from evolving and really making your unique ability the most powerful ability that you ever have? It's time for you to get clear on that and start to let go of the things that are actually holding you back from living your best fucking life and experience freedom in time, money, relationships, purpose. It's all my love. You need to read the book. I love you. Until next time. Thank you for joining me on the Empower and Evolve podcast. I hope that today's episode has sparked a new insight, or perhaps reminded you of your own power to manifest change. If you found value in our time together, I invite you to subscribe and share this podcast with someone who might need a little reminder of their own magical power. It would mean the world to me if you could take just 2 minutes to review the podcast and help it reach more people. And remember, the journey of transformation is ongoing, and sometimes the most powerful step that we can take is to simply pause, breathe, and realign with our deepest intention. Until next time.